Good morning, everyone. We are very delighted to virtually have you with us all today to launch the biannual Jordan Economic Monitor report. I would like first to take this opportunity to welcome our JSF members, World Bank representatives, guests from the government, national and international organizations, and lastly but not least, our distinguished presenter, Dr. Sadia Rifat, and panelist, His Excellency, Dr. Adel Sharkas, His Excellency Engineer Jamil Mjahed, and Dr. Ghazi Al-Assaf. Before starting, I would like to highlight some logistical matters. The event is broadcasted live on JSF Facebook page and YouTube channel. Audience can ask their questions through YouTube chat and Facebook comment. Participants over Zoom can raise their hand to ask or comment. The discussion language today is English. We have simultaneous interpretation to Arabic. For participants who would like to switch to Arabic, please click on the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen. We at the JSF are very proud of our consistent collaboration with the World Bank of Jordan, with the World Bank group. We have launched together multiple policy papers, and the Jordan Economic Monitor biannual report is one of them indeed. Today we are launching and will be discussing shortly the fall 2021 report under the title En Route to Recovery. As you probably know, the Jordan Economic Monitor report provides an update on key economic developments and policies over the past 6 months. It also presents findings from recent World Bank on Jordan. The impact of COVID-19 on the global economy, we all know, is unique. The virus has hit both the supply side and demand side of economies. The virus did not spare large and rich economies. The virus dealt a blow to stock markets, banks, foreign direct investment, and workers' remittances. The implication of COVID-19 notwithstanding, Jordan is more vulnerable than many countries. Indeed, the years before the onslaught of the virus, it was known that Jordan faced a myriad of socioeconomic challenges. These include, for example, modest economic growth, consistent budget deficit, increasing public debt, persistent trade deficits, and high and rising unemployment rates, not to mention the deterioration in infrastructure. The COVID-19 has only highlighted the scale of the challenges even further. The eventual impact of COVID-19 on the Jordanian economy still evolves. However, one can argue that the new normal should be the realization of strong and sustainable economic growth rates that break the cycle of double-digit unemployment rates. Within this context of all the above-mentioned observation, it is really timely to launch today Jordan Economic Monitor by the World Bank. Without any due delays, let me hand over to Ms. Holly Bennett, the resident representative of the World Bank Group in Jordan. Ms. Holly has over 15 years of experience promoting development solutions for countries facing complex transition and reform, conflict and forced displacement challenges, and has a diverse expertise with international organizations and think tanks. The floor is yours, Ms. Holly.
Thank you so much, Nasreen, and thank you very much to the Jordan Strategy Forum for hosting us today for the launch of the World Bank's Fall 2021 GEM, En Route to Recovery, and also to our esteemed group of panelists that are joining for today's discussion, and all of you that are joining today to help us discuss and exchange on these issues. We're very much looking forward to today's meeting. As the JTF mentioned, the World Bank team produces Jordan Economic Monitors twice a year to provide an update and analysis on key economic developments and policies. The monitors also place these trends in a long-term and global context and assesses the implications of these developments and other changes in policy on the economic outlook for Jordan. The analysis ranges from the macroeconomy to financial markets to indicators of human welfare and development. And we hope that our GIMs can be valuable gems of analysis and serve a wide audience, including policymakers, business leaders, financial market participants, and the community of analysts and professionals engaged in Jordan. The fall 2021 GIM points to a few key trends in Jordan's efforts to weather the crisis and promote early recovery. And I hope we can discuss these today. First, Jordan's economy in 2020 weathered the COVID-19 shock very well in comparison to its global peers. So I think this is a very important point and very much a testament to the resilience of its people and its economy. Moreover, timely and supportive fiscal and monetary policy was an important mitigating factor, along with the steps taken to ensure rapid expansion, access of social assistance for the poor and vulnerable, as well as timely support to small businesses. So Jordan actually emerged much better than many other countries in terms of the COVID-19 shock. However, while the economy is a relatively positive story, in the wake of the pandemic, Jordan is facing an unprecedented unemployment challenge, which is very much at crisis level when we look at unemployment numbers, in particular for women and youth. And here, much more effort is needed to accelerate reform implementation for private sector-led growth and job creation, and a concerted effort to position youth and women to take advantage of new economic opportunities. Thirdly, Jordan's recovery path is still bumpy. During the first half of 2021, the economy registered a solid bounce back, but the recovery path is very much uneven, and downside risks remain significant, particularly in light of the anticipated global economic slowdown, the emergence of the new variant, and an already stressed global supply chains. And fourth, and finally, I just want to make the point that we recognize as the World Bank that policymaking during such uncertain times is extremely challenging. Policymakers need to be vigilant and adaptive. They have to walk a tightrope and find this balance that allows them to deliver inclusive and sustainable growth while preserving macroeconomic stability. This is no easy task, and I think we must mobilize all possible tools to support them. And I think it's on all of us, as well as partners, international partners, as private sector representatives, as civil society and others, to really make it through the crisis and promote recovery together. We as the World Bank remain a committed partner to this effort and supporting Jordan to recover and prosper during these challenging times. Thank you so much again to all of you for joining, and very much looking forward to today's discussion. Back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Holly. Let me at this point hand over to Dr. Sadia Rifat to present the main findings of the report, and then perhaps we'll open the discussion from our panelists before opening it to the floor. But before, let me introduce Dr. Sadia Rifat. She's the Senior Country Economist for Jordan, World Bank Group, and she is leading the overall effort of GIM at the World Bank for many years. Before coming to Jordan, she was working as a Senior Country Economist for the World Bank in Pakistan. She has previously worked for International Monetary Fund, Pakistan and Washington, D.C. She brings with her 15 years of experience of working as a development and macroeconomist. Over to you, Sadia.
Thank you so much, Excellency Nasreen. Let me just share my screen and let me welcome you all to today's event, esteemed guest and panelists.
Sure.
So you can see my screen, right?
Yeah, we can see
okay.
it.
So I have a relatively short presentation, but despite being short, this will expected to take around 15 to 20 minutes. So as we discussed, my name is Sadia Rifat. I would like to welcome you all to today's launch for Jordan Economic Monitor Fall 2021, titled En Route to Recovery. As has been discussed before me, the Economic Monitor is a biannual publication of the World Bank. And what it looks at is the recent economic development over the past 6-8 months, It also allows us to present the view on how the economy is likely to unfold in the coming years. And along with that, there's also special focus sections which are part of these reports. And today's report has two special sections. One is on using the Wealth of Nation methodology of the World Bank. And basically, there's a Wealth of Nation application for Jordan. And the second one is the public transport challenge for Jordan. So I'll come to that as well. One big key takeaway from all of this is that the global economy bounced back relatively very strongly in 2021. And if you look at across the globe, the forecast being done, the numbers are around 5.9 to 6% for the global recovery. And this you can see on the left-hand side, which present the outlook from the IMF VO, both June and October. And there was a marginal downgrade on the global economy, but overall it was still projected to do quite well. What is important to note here is one of the things that Holly also stressed is that there's a marked difference in performance in the first half of the 21 and also the second half of the 21 as far as the world economy is concerned. And the overall global number is also masking significant differences that have emerged across countries. One example is the advanced economies. Because of a high capacity to undertake stabilizing and fiscal and macroeconomic policies, these economies have bounced back quite significantly, almost to the pre-pandemic level. While if you look at the emerging market developing economies, and as you can see on the right-hand side of these figures, the downgrade in terms of how well they were expected to do is quite significant, almost 40 to 50 basis point during these projections. And for the low-income developing economies, this downgrade is over 100 basis point. And we are also hearing that there are going to be further revision as we enter December and January for overall global economy. So that is quite significant of importance for us to take away at the moment. The second point is, if you look at the left-hand side of the figure, you can see that the COVID cases started to rise in the world even before the Omicron appeared in the picture. And this you can see from the red line, even the high-income countries. For the high-income countries now, as of December 11th, when is this data time-stamped for, the rise in cases, daily new cases, is almost as equal to what it was in December and November last year. So we are already again touching the peak, and these countries have very high level of vaccination. For example, if you look at advanced economies in totality, almost 70% of the population has received one vaccination. If we look at the emerging market, developing economies, almost 50% of the population has at least one dose. If we go to LIC, we are looking at almost hardly 5% vaccination rate. So the global access to vaccination remains very different, and that is also allowing for these mutation to take place, and that which have repercussions for the global recovery across the world. If we look at Jordan, how well Jordan did, and this is also my esteemed panelist before me also spoke about, is the fact that Jordan economy weathered the storm in 2020 relatively very well. In fact, if we look at across the globe, it was one of the economies which relatively contracted much less, around 1.6% of GDP. And this can largely be attributed to the proactive fiscal and monetary policy of the government of Jordan, which cushioned this shock to a considerable degree. What we are also seeing emerging in 2021 is a very strong bounce back of the economy. In fact, if you look at the just the quarter two growth, we are looking at almost 3.2% growth during quarter two, supported by the services sector as well as the industrial sector, which has taken the overall growth for the H1 2021 to around 1.8%. So that's quite significant because this is almost touching the pre-pandemic level as well. However, if you look more carefully into where this growth is coming from, and that is shown on the right-hand side from the graph, we can see that if you compare the subsectoral supply side performance compared to the pre-pandemic level, you can see the green bars are showing the subsectors which are doing better than the pre-pandemic level, and the red bars are showing the performance worse compared to the pre-pandemic level. And there you can see some important subsectors such as restaurants and hotel, transport and communication, for example. In totality, if we take the stock together, this is almost at the moment almost 50-50 split, which is happening between both these sectors. So the growth prospect at the remain balanced because of what we are seeing as so far in front of us. As Holly also pointed out, I mean, Jordan entered the COVID-19 crisis already with elevated unemployment numbers. So towards the end of 2019, the unemployment for Jordan stood at 19%. The pandemic has had significant shock on the unemployment rate, and it has taken that to almost, according to the most latest data available for end quarter two, to around 24.8%. If we use the lens of looking at, for example, youth, the crisis is even more apparent, where every 1 out of 2 youth being unemployed. So in a way, the COVID shock has magnified the already vulnerability in the labor market that was evident before entering the crisis. And I think one more sign that is appearing, and it's not a positive sign, is that we talked just right now about growth recovery, and that growth recovery is somehow not making any dent at the moment on the unemployment level. I think that's also quite an important factor to note. This takes me to the external sector in terms of how the external sector did in 2021. So the 2020 saw emergence of a current account deficit compared to 2019. We moved from a 2.1% current account deficit in 2019 to almost 8.5% in 2020. And the reason was apparent, right? Despite having a small trade deficit, because not only exports contracted, but imports contracted much significantly than export. The travel receipts that you can see from the left-hand side of the graph, and you look at the orange bars, almost disappeared. And this was in line with what was happening as a result of COVID shock to international tourism all over the world. So Jordan saw in 2020 almost 76% decline in tourism receipts. And that has had a significant impact on the current account. When we go, but with that, what I want to leave the caveat with, and I'll come back to that later, that for the 2021, we are again seeing similar pressure on the external sector, but the underlying factors are different this time. We see robust performance of the exports, but we're also seeing, as a result of pent-up demand, a very significant increase in the import, which is happening. So the trade deficit has increased. Moreover, the oil prices now are much firmer than they were in 2020. And that is also leading to higher import value as well. Along with that, one positive sign that we saw, at least in the Q1 and Q2, was the fact that the travel receipts started to bounce back. So at the end of Q2, compared to 2020, there was almost 40% increase in the travel receipts. But despite this good performance, what we had was this level was still only 1/3 of the level of a pre-pandemic. So that still has quite a bit of a road to recovery in terms of the pre-pandemic levels. If we look at the right-hand side, what the point from the external sector pressure is that despite all of this, as a result of the monetary policy effort of the Central Bank of Jordan, as well as the external financing flows, the reserve coverage both in 2020 and 2021 remained adequate. In fact, if we look at between December 20, that is the end of the last year, and October 2021, which is when the report is time-stamped, we can see that the Central Bank of Jordan gross reserves increased by more than $1 billion. So that is quite significant for the external account sustainability. If I move forward to the fiscal performance over the last 6 to 8 months, this is another area of significant positive news. At the moment, we are seeing the consolidation effort happening in the 2021. In fact, The central government fiscal deficit is almost 1.5% of GDP, lower than the 2020 level. This is being driven by robust performance of the domestic revenues, which are growing by almost 21% as a result of very good performance of tax revenues. So in a challenging year, which still continues to be a 2021, this is extremely positive news. Even though on the recurrent spending side, the recurrent spending remains elevated, reflecting the pandemic-related spending pressures. But another good thing is that the public investment is also showing strong rebound. It's almost 0.5% of GDP, higher than what it was in 2020 at 1.6%. As a result, what we have at the moment is that the public and publicly gross debt net of SSIF is almost stationary at the level of 2020, and the same goes if we include that into that definition. This takes me to the slide on the outlook in terms of how we are seeing the economy unfold now in the next year. And what the World Bank is projecting is the real GDP growth of 2.2% at the moment. And please keep in mind that this projection for the economy happened in early October. That is when the report is time-stamped. And like I said, further information has been shared as well. The headline CPI is expected to be projected at around 2.0%, so limited level impact of the prices. When we look at the central government deficit, including grants, we are anticipating a consolidation effort of around 1% of GDP. As a result, there is only going to be a marginal increase in the government and government debt net of SSIF holding to around 90%, which is quite remarkable given what happened in 2020. Current account balance of around 11% of GDP. So this is going to be another elevated years. And I spoke about the fact that it's based on the fact that higher trade balance as a result of rising price of oil, as well as slow recovery of the travel receipts at the moment. Over the medium term, we expect some uptick in the growth to 2.3% next year. We expect consolidation effort to continue for the next year by the same amount. As a result, the government and government guaranteed debt net of SSIF is almost expected to remain stationary. Current account balance to start narrowing down as the travel receipts start to reach almost their pre-pandemic level by 2023. But with this, I want to leave you with certain downside risks that Holly also referred to, which are now much more significant at the time when we were doing the outlook. One of the fact was that I just also spoke about the fact that the rising cases, COVID cases, and you can see this in this graph, and the red line represents Jordan and as of December 11th. And the right side of the graph is showing the vaccination rate as well, time-stamped at December 11th. So the Jordan has 2 doses vaccination of around 37% of population. If we just take 1 dose, this is taking the population to 41%. And looking at how the cases are unfolding at the moment across the globe, that becomes a serious downside risk, because it's also a downside risk for the global economy and even for advanced economies, which have vaccination rates reaching almost 70-80%. We just saw the situation in UK yesterday, which reported more than 83,000 live cases yesterday, despite very high vaccination rate, and almost a crisis situation because of emergence of 2 viruses together, both COVID-19 and as also Omicron. Now, the Omicron has further complicated a situation that was already emerging with some concerns, right? And we know that how the stock market reacted to this news when Omicron was first reported on, I think, 24th of November. As the stocks fell in most of the market, we saw almost a $10 downward plunge in the price of oil in 1 day, reacting to this news. We also have new travel restrictions now imposed across many of the countries, which is making the movement again very difficult. So this has a bearing on the fact that even though the assumptions, that the global assumption was that the revival of international tourism by 2023, and more significant recovery in the 2022. We don't know how the initial first half of the 2022 is now going to play out, and that has important implication for an economy like Jordan that significantly depends on tourism receipts. Like I said, Omicron poses another level of challenge for the global economy and also for all the countries. Like when I was talking about the view and also from our own global economic prospect projection, the global growth was expected to slow down significantly from this year, and the number we looked at was around 6%. But there's expectation that 2022, 2022, there was going to be already a significant slowdown that was expected. Now with the Omicron, that also puts further downside to the fact that how much the global economy is expected to, how well it can do in the immediate run, 2022 and 2023. We were expecting global trade to soften as well, and the softening was anticipated on the back of global supply chains disruptions, which were initially, before Omicron, we had already these global supply chains stressed quite significantly. That you can see from the heat map I'm showing at the bottom of my screen, which since July, August, October is showing most of these supply chains in red. So this is all without Omicron. But if a country like China, which has a zero tolerance policy for COVID-19 cases and also reported almost 100 cases 2 days back, and also a big concern for one of the manufacturing hub in China as well, places any kind of a further restriction, right? And they have a ripple effect that can get created from China to the global supply chain, to the trade, and then the global growth. So those risks are now much more pronounced as a result of the situation that we are seeing now, looking at December, and also, like I talked about travel. The other thing is that the price forecast for the international oil has been revised as well when we were doing the economic monitor. So that is now almost $5 per barrel higher and expected to remain firm over the medium term as well. So that is another thing to keep mind of. So I think, like Holly said, this is not over yet, and I think that's why we have to. It's kind of a storm which is coming and going, but the condition still remain far from over. Let me go to the special sections of the report, and as I said, there are two special sections. I will try to be quite brief as it's possible. The first section looks at the wealth of Jordan, and basically using the wealth of nation methodology of the World Bank, which is a methodology that the World Bank has developed, and it has been constantly being improved since 1995, and it now covers almost over 100 countries in the world. What this is trying to do is basically move the discussion away from GDP, just GDP as a measure of a country welfare, even though there's no question that the GDP is a good measure of economic progress. Like it captures the economic activity that is taking place in 1 year, but it's a flow measure. So this attempt is basically to move the discussion towards a more holistic concept of the value of wealth that a nation has. And according to this definition, just very briefly, and I'll be happy at the end to share the link to the report, and you can look at the detail annex as well. The report, the flagship report, is the Wealth of Nation 2021 at the World Bank website. The definition of the wealth includes produced capital, it includes the natural capital, both renewable and non-renewable, it includes human capital, and it includes NFA. So these are the four building blocks of the way the definition is holding. And of course, underneath it, you can see that produced capital includes the urban land, machinery structure, the non-renewable include fossil fuels. I won't go to details all of this, but the purpose, as I said, is again to look at more holistic asset base that an economy has, and also allow for the fact that there would be diminishing that is happening in this asset. There's a depletion, there's natural shocks that are happening that are also affecting the endowment a country has, and then come up with a comprehensive assessment of where a country is. This is just an annex. like I said, technical annex on the methodology, very short one. The original one is around 20-25 pages as a part of the whole report. Let me come to the finding on the application if you use from excuse me, from that report to Jordan. What we are finding between 1995 and also the 2018, and this you can see from the right-hand side bar, is that the blue bars are representing Jordan. The Jordan wealth per capita almost remained at the same level, averaging around US dollar 35,000. This is constant dollars. And it peaked in 2010 when it was as high, it reached at as high as 41,000. And if we put this in comparison, because of course this allows us to relatively compare against other countries or a bloc, we compare this against the UMIC, upper middle income countries. And you can see that there has been a tremendous change in how the UMIC started to where they are now. In fact, by 2018, a typical UMIC citizen is now, his per capita wealth is 4.3 times higher than Jordan. So that is quite significant, but it's also significant in terms of how the endowment started, right? Because let's not get fixated on this, but the fact is that at the initial level, if you look at the produced capital per capita, Jordan and UMIC almost started with a similar level of produced capital. By 2018, the UMIC produced capital per capita was double of Jordan. So that was one of the factors that allowed them to perform better. The other one is the human capital per capita. Again, Jordan endowment at 1995 on per capita basis was around 63% of UMIC. When we reached 2018, the UMIC per capita human capital was, Jordan was only 1/5 of the UMIC per capita. So that's also significant changes that happen. But what is behind all of this, and that I think all of us know the answer to this question, and one is the growth dynamics, and the other one is the population explosion that Jordan faced, and the third one is the external shocks, right? So we have seen a markdown in the growth performance, and I think Her Excellency Nasreen also referred to it, that if you look at the 2020-2010 decade, right, the average growth for Jordan is just around 2%. So it has come down significantly from almost 6.5% in the previous decade. But if you look at the population as a result increase, and if I can borrow from Professor Hosman, then between 2007 and 2018, we saw Jordan population increase by unprecedented 50%, which has not happened for any other country in the world. And couple that with the external shocks, right? Starting with the global financial crisis towards the end of the decade, and the first Arab Spring and the Syrian crisis. So all of that has been an important factor in terms of how the growth started to lose momentum along with the other pressure, and that has been the reason for this gap. What is needed to change the status quo is that urgent reforms are needed to enhance the productivity, improve market contestability, business climate, and improving underlying regulatory environments. So this is the things they are becoming even more important over time. Let me go to the last special section of the report, which is the public transport challenge in Jordan. One very important thing that's coming from that is that the transport-related inefficiencies in Jordan are around approximately, according to various estimates, around 6% of Jordan's annual GDP. If we look at the number of private cars and how they grew between 2008 and 18, so a decade almost, they increased by an unprecedented 94%. While if we look at the public vehicles, they just grew by 45%. So the private cars are growing very high. This also has an impact on the climate side as well because of the greenhouse gases associated. So if no action is taken, our annual transport greenhouse gas emission from the transport sector could increase to almost 11,000 gigs by over next 10 years to 2030. Of course, government is aware of these concerns and has been taking necessary measures, and that include the Public Transport Law of 2017. We have pilot public transport projects in Irbid, Zarqa, Jerash. We have Amman and Amman, Zarqa, BRT, some of the examples that I'm quoting here, but still the key challenges still remain acute, and they are around 4 areas: availability, that is the coverage and the frequency, reliability, affordability of the public transportation. And of course, this is important to note that the household is spending on average 17% of their income on transport. And if you look at youth, this goes as high as quarter of their income. So that's quite considerable. There are also social and cultural accessibility issues related to that. And those are particularly important when you look at perception of women toward these services and how that is impacting the way they are able to or not able to access the employment opportunities, for example. The physical accessibility is another concern. And for example, how the mobility impaired people are able to access these services to become part of the economic growth, economic opportunities of economy. So with that, I will stop here, and thank you so much for listening to me, and I remain here to answer any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sadia. Probably Sadia gave us some good news and some bad news, but at the same time, the challenges are big, really, in front of us, whether private sector, government, policymakers. And here I would like to move to our distinguished panelists and again thank them for taking the time to participate with us. Actually, I would like to go to first His Excellency Dr. Adel Sharkas. Dr. Adel Sharkas is the Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Jordan. He held several positions at the Central Bank since 1991. He is actively leading the task force that worked on monetary policy formulation and on providing consultancy and recommendation on issues relevant to the financial and economic stability. Also, at the Central Bank of Jordan, he's the chairman of the Credit Facility Committee, the vice chairman of the Investment Committee and the Human Resources Committee, as well as he is a member of the IT Steering Committee. Dr. Adel, Sadia gave us some good news and bad news. Do you agree with the report finding that the recovery remains uneven across sectors and appears to be slightly losing steam in Q2? What, if anything, is holding a stronger recovery back, in your opinion? And what needs to be done? The floor is yours, Dr. Adel.
Thank you, Your Excellency. First of all, I'd like to thank the World Bank team and represented by Ms. Holly Benner, representative for Jordan, and of course, Dr. Sadia, the senior country economist at the team and the team leader for the report, for the great efforts that are evident in preparing this report. And of course, special thanks go to Jordan Strategy Forum for holding and hosting this event. In fact, I'd like to highlight that this report is a great value because it provides comprehensive and in-depth analysis of economic developments and challenges in Jordan, mainly in the areas of economic growth, fiscal and monetary policy, external sector, and labor market. This is in addition to the economic decision maker. These issues are very important for the policymaker, and I find two issues are important at this report: the measuring Jordan's wealth, national wealth, and the challenge of public transportation in Jordan. Thus, I think this report represents an important reference for the policymaker in Jordan, as well as for researcher and other interested person on our topic. Now, in terms of our growth so far, I think as a small economy, Jordan continues to experience unprecedented social and economic challenges due to the COVID-19 pandemic. However, preventative actions and strong vaccination campaign mitigated the effect of COVID variants. Supported by targeted fiscal and monetary measures, we can see sign of recovery is underway. Now, if we look to the during the year of 1991, the Jordanian economy began to enter the stage of recovery from the consequences of Corona, as it's recorded a positive growth in second half of 3.6, as Sadia pointed out. On average, the first half was 1.8, and this is if compared with last year, it was negative. And of course, this is driven by the acceleration of the pace of vaccination and the gradual opening of economic sectors and the improvement in the global demand perspective. It's expected that the pace of recovery will continue during the second half of the year, especially with full opening of the economy at the beginning of September 2021. Now, in general, our expectation of the economic growth rate for the year 2021 are consistent with what was stated in the report. I mean, at the CBJ, we are consistent, but they are more optimistic about the year 2022, which I hope, Sadia, your figure realized, as our expectation indicate a growth of rate of 2% for 2021 and 2.7 during 2022. And of course, again, these are driven by the improvement indicators of the external sector and domestic demand, and range. It will range around 3.3 in the medium term. Of course, also I should highlight that despite the economic recovery achieved during the first half of 2021, it was not enough to reduce the employment rate among Jordanians. As Sadia fairly said, the employment today it stands at 24.9, which makes us agree with what we mentioned in the report, that was this is as consequence of Corona pandemic have left distortion on the market. However, it's too early to judge whether these distortions are temporary or permanent. And I'd like to stress this point. I don't know if you heard 2 days ago, the Minister of Planning pointed out that the employment rate might come at 23.2 as the end of the third quarter. So if this is true, that would be good news for us, and hopefully it would be temporary phenomena. In addition, there is no doubt that the structural reforms that the government intends to take during the coming period, including labor market reform, will have a positive impact on labor market indicators. Now, as for the last point, do I agree that I don't agree in the second half or the second quarter is witnessing slow little bit? I think I would like to agree with the analysis presented in the report. There is signs of slow, but I believe the third quarter and the fourth quarter, they will achieve much better growth, driven by the total reopening of the economy since this June. Today, there is signs that from our banking sectors that all the creditors started to repay their payments at time. And this means that they started to receive their cash flow back and back to normal, or there is sign of that their business going back to normal. Also, if we witness, we will release within a few minutes the figure for the travel receipts for the first 11 months. It's a growth of 77%. This will support, and you know how the tourism, it's very important sector in our economy. Also the external sector, as Sadia also you mentioned, there is a huge improvement in work remittances. It's outperformed our expectation, in fact. So I will agree with the limitations, and let's hope the best. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Adel. I love the optimistic look of the Central Bank of Jordan, although I would say it's a realistic one. It's not only optimistic, but more of a realistic one. Let me now go to His Excellency Dr. Jamil Mjahid. And there was a specific section on transportation, Your Excellency, in this report. His Excellency Mr. Jamil Mjahid is the former Minister of Transport and senior engineer with 30 years of experience in road transport and safety. He has a wide experience in road transport and traffic safety management and also in institutional issues in the public and private sector. I'm going to ask the same question. Do you agree with the report's findings that the recovery remains uneven across sectors and appears to be slightly losing steam in Q2? But also, I would like to ask you that in 2017, the government of Jordan adopted a public transportation revised law and the reform matrix, which includes public transportation reform actions in 2019. Since then, very little has been achieved, while the public transport system continues to deteriorate. And the numbers that were shown by Dr. Saadiya tells us more about that. What are the main challenges that the various governments face, preventing them from taking concrete decision to reform and develop this sector forward? I leave the floor for you, Your Excellency, Mr. Jamil.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank World Bank Group and the team who prepared the report, and for GSF for giving me the chance to be part of this panel to discuss this report. That is that the Jordan Economics Monitor discuss important issues concerning the economy performance during the last 6 months in Jordan. And I believe it is an important reference for policy and decision makers in Jordan. As you mentioned, I think my intervention will be in 2 parts. The first part, I will discuss the recovery plan across sectors. And the second part, I will focus on public transport challenges in Jordan. That is the COVID-19 pandemic puts a severe economics and social shocks in all countries alike. And Jordan is no exceptions. Yet, the impact in Jordan economy is further amplified as the country was already moving along low growth path amid high unemployment rates. During the period covered by the report, after initial shock, Jordan managed to facilitate the opening of the economy following the COVID-19 lockdown. Economic activity is now expected to return to its pre-pandemic levels until maybe until the second half of 2022 or 2023. And the recovery is projected to be, as the report mentioned, that is going to be slow and uneven. I believe the government should have a strong recovery plan. Firstly, this plan should include increasing, of course, the vaccination rate, as any delay in the vaccination could adversely impact domestic mobility, consumption, tourism. The Secondly, structural reforms could support key drivers of the growth. Reforms that is lower trade costs and barriers could help to maximize the benefit of the ongoing recovery. And of course, liberalization of trade on services and other measures to promote the economic openness. In addition to that, I think the government would need to invest in strengthening the social protection system. The crisis underscored the needs to ensure that the social protection system covers the large informal sector in Jordan all times, not only during the crisis. If we move to the second part of the report regarding the Jordan public transport sector. Know that Jordan transportation sector is considered the backbone of the national economy and an essential pillar of the country's economic, commercial, and social and cultural growth in Jordan. We know countries are known to provide public transport to residents as public services for the purpose of facilitating residents' movement and economic and social well-being. This public service falls within the state scope of authority and budget. However, the poor public transport services delivers to residents of Jordan are the results of the various issues affecting the Jordanian public transportation sector. The report highlighted the main public transportation challenges, and I agree with all of these challenges, like the high cost of public transport, the organized services, poor reliability, and limited of the service as well. As you mentioned, in spite of the government of Jordan adopted many initiatives, there are so many policies, strategies, plans, laws for the last a few years. Since then, I think very little has been achieved as well. The question arises, and you ask, and I don't think that is the report did answer, why the public transport has not been developed despite the government adoption of all of these initiatives. I think the easy answer to this question, at the policy level, public transportation in Jordan is clearly not yet at the priority levels it needs to be. Although several initiatives have been taken place, a tangible improvement in existing public transportation channels has yet to be observed. I think the lack of political will led to a lack of funding from the government and lack of qualified human resources capable of implementing plans and the projects to develop the sector. And you mentioned, let me discuss the example you gave, that is the lack of political will. As you mentioned, in 2017, the passenger transport law sought to develop the public transport sector through the amendments that they were introduced to it, which includes creating the foundation for decentralization of the sector and allowing the municipalities to take some of the responsibilities of for the urban public transport. And the second amendment was another issue that the law tackled, is forcing individual operators, which is a main problem in public transport in Jordan, to switch to transport companies within a period not exceeding 5 years from the date of the law enforcement, which was in 2017, sorry. And the third issue was establishing the Passenger Transport Support Fund. Unfortunately, the law has not been enforced, and none of these initiatives has been implemented. It is easy, of course, to adopt initiatives, but it is hard to implement when there is no will. While Jordan has historically prioritized investing in transportation infrastructure and adopting policies encouraging the use of the private cars, with limited attention being paid to the quality of the public transportation services. I think this has to be changed, and to go forward, policy reforms should focus squarely on the goal of affecting a model shift from private cars to public transportation and encourage more people to use public transport. And the second goal is how to make the public transport sustainable by using, of course, renewable energy and upgrading transportation option, including, of course, biking and walking. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. I think His Excellency has made it clear that he agrees with the findings of the report, although he would like to see more discussion around why yet the transportation or the implementation of the strategies is not taking place. And he argues that the lack of political will is still there, and it's translated into a lack of resources and lack of capacity. And also he mentioned a very interesting point regarding the decentralization of the sector and giving a more autonomous responsibility to the municipalities, which some other experts also agree with this view, and maybe in the discussion we can tackle this point further. But let me at this point go to our third and last but not least speaker, Dr. Ghazi Al-Assaf. Dr. Ghazi Al-Assaf is Associate Professor of Economics at Business Economics Department at the University of Jordan. He is on a sabbatical leave in Joan bin Jassim Academy for Defense Studies. He is also working as a directing staff at the Royal Jordanian National Defense College. His teaching and research interests focus on macroeconomics, applied econometrics, and economic development. Dr. Ghazi, we'll leave you with the hard part of the questions. The economy recovery is underway. The Central Bank of Jordan is somehow more optimistic and things will be brighter, let's say, in the coming period of time. However, the unemployment remains relatively high. Why job creation is not responding to growth? And also, we saw from the presentation of Dr. Sadia that it was very unfortunate to note that the per capita wealth gap between Jordan and upper middle income countries has widened significantly during the period 2010 to 2018. We do understand that the population, the increase in population could cover or be a legitimate reason for that. But still, seeing a consistent level since 1995 is an issue.
Yeah.
why this is not happening, why we are not moving, why we are sometimes witnessing growth but not translating that growth into actual things. I leave you to answer the hard questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, actually, Nasreen. Thank you very much for the World Bank for inviting me to be with you this morning. It's my great pleasure, and the thanks extended to the Jordan Strategic Forum and for you, Nasreen, and for organizing this great event. I'm so glad to be with you this morning, actually, with this distinguished panelists and guests. These are actually the hardest questions to answer about the Jordanian economy. But let me first thank the World Bank for the report itself. I did enjoy reading this report. Actually, it provides a very brilliant indicators about the macroeconomic performance for Jordan. Central Bank of Jordan, they are always optimistic, actually, because I totally agree with them. They are always doing a great job, to be honest with you. I'm not biased with them, but they are doing a great job. And this is reflected on the financial sector and the banking sector in Jordan. We can all notice this progress. The problem is actually, it's the core problem for the Jordan is unemployment again. And let me just remind you that unemployment is a problem before the COVID-19. It just was a serious problem, the huge problem for us, and the constant problem with Jordan. And it was increasing dramatically even before the pandemic crisis. Why is that? We need, again, why we cannot reflect what we have as economic growth on the labor market? Because I'm always saying that the Jordanian labor market is unfortunately in a huge mess. We have structural problems. We have problems comes from the private sector. The private sector cannot expand properly because of the economic policies, mainly fiscal policies. And we have a structural problem in the educational system itself, because the outcomes of the educational system is still not suitable for what we need. We've been talking like more than 10 years about vocational and technical education in Jordan, and there is no progress, actually. So this is, again, there is a gap, and the gap is getting larger and larger between the outcomes of the educational system and what we need in the labor market. In my view, from an academic point of view, I think the main problem, especially for the why we don't have an effective economic growth, I think because mainly we need to go to enhance the demand side. In my view, it's a demand side problem. We need to encourage demand more and more, not doing what we call it sometimes tax reforms in order to enhance our fiscal policies to get a higher revenues and to show a picture that we got a few millions more. But we need to think it as a circle. This will affect actually the middle income people, the people who encouraging the demand in the local markets. And if we are able to encourage demand in the local market again, we can let the private sector to expand. So hiring more, creating more jobs. So this is our circle that we actually have the lack, and we need to concentrate in. One more problem is just that we have a stereotypes for the jobs actually in Jordan. Most of the people still until now wants to work in the government, wants to work with a desk at the table, as we said, and they don't want to move on to the professions and the vocational like educations, although they got a higher income. I think this is something to do with the mentality of the Jordanian people, and this is the duty of the government, because this is starting from the school. So it takes long, medium, and long term to change all these things. So again, this is actually explaining why we don't do better in a wealth distribution, why we don't do better in job creations and having effective economic growth, and just to see more or lower unemployment rate. Actually, the last point that I want just to consider that for the public transportation, I totally agree with what His Excellency Mr. Jamil Mujahid mentioned, and what is mentioned in presentations of Dr. Saadiya. But I want actually to add one more challenge, which is the reliability. reliability of the public transportations. And again, this is something to do with the mentality of the Jordanian people. It's not reliable at all. They need to work on the reliability. Why do they are more reliable when they go abroad, and they use the public transportations. So it's again the reliability problem. That's all. I don't want actually to take more time. This is what I think about the answer for the very big questions.
Thank you so much. Dr. Ghazi still believes that there are some structural problems when it comes to the private sector and its role or actually the fact that it's not expanding and it's not creating more jobs. And also he tackled some structural problems when it comes to education, and he believes that there's no serious effort towards reform. He suggested probably solutions towards demand, stimulating the demand and stimulating the demand of the middle class, let's say, that will help in expanding the private sector, which ultimately should help in creating jobs. He tackled also the issue, the cultural issue, but also he mentioned regarding the transportation, the reliability issue. At this point, I would like to open the floor for all participants on Zoom to ask and comment, and we will also receive questions from Zoom chat, YouTube chat, and Facebook comments. And I think we have colleagues from the World Bank who also may contribute when answering the questions. Let me start with His Excellency Marwan Jum'a. تفضل.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Thank you, Nasreen, and thank you for the World Bank for the very informative presentation. I will try to be brief, and I think these sessions, unfortunately, while informative, have become quite frustrating because we all know the issues and the challenges. We're not moving ahead in resolving them. A few points. When it comes to unemployment, you mentioned that the numbers may have come down, maybe a positive sign. But taking consideration defense law number 6, that unfortunately we have a lot of hidden unemployment because people cannot, unfortunately, you have to maintain your staff because of defense law 6. And if once that defense law is removed, then unfortunately we have more unemployment coming up. So that's a serious issue you have to contend with. On the transport issue that Mujahid mentioned, and one of the problems, I think, Doctor, a good friend of mine, you are the 15th minister of the past 10 years in transportation. I mean, we know what the problems are. We've had 15 ministers of transportation. When you talk about education, higher education, we've had 13 ministers of higher education over the past 10 years. Sometimes we close the ministry, sometimes we merge it with the Ministry of Education. So the consistency we have, and typically when we have ministers come in, we don't have plans. It's personal input, personal initiative, personal views, and we are suffering from that. So I think what we need in Jordan, and we're rudderless. We feel there's no direction, there's no long-term plan, and there's no accountability. And we have been in this quick fix mode and crisis management mode since 2008. Since the financial crisis hit, and Jamil, you served in government, and others did. Whenever you try to think strategic and on long-term, the Minister of Finance says we have to meet a payment at the end of the month. So every long-term discussion, a medium-term discussion is put aside so you can address immediate needs. And we have been in this mode since 2008 and unable to get out of it. And rankings have been falling. We have been falling behind while other countries moving ahead because we have been consistently in this crisis management mode. And so the problem is we have to get out of this mode. We need a long-term plan, and we need to hold people accountable when people don't deliver. We all know that when you don't deliver, actually nothing happens. You move on to another cabinet. These are the ills in Jordan that anyone can identify. Everyone on Facebook can tell you what the problems are. We all know what the issues are. The frustrating part is we're unable to address many of these challenges. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. So His Excellency maybe expressed a frustration that is widely felt regarding so many issues that we have discussed. Maybe how about we take more than question and then ask the speakers to tackle from their perspective. But before that, may I ask Mira Murad to comment on the transportation section, because she might have some also points to add. Mira, would you like to comment? Is Mira with us? Okay, then let me go until Mira be with us to His Excellency Faris Brezat. And Your Excellency, yeah, please.
Thank you very much. This has been really informative, and I have been going through the report just to get a better understanding of the overall macroeconomic issues discussed. I have a couple of questions. Sadia Rifat, she mentioned that about the unemployment, it's a crisis level. I would like to know exactly what does it mean? What is the definition of a crisis level when it comes to unemployment? Is it like 10% crisis level, or 25%, or 30%? And what is the criteria of that definition? And is there any specific set of recommendations that the World Bank has come up with or worked on to address that issue? And the second question is, I was wondering whether there is any work done by the World Bank Group in Jordan on public sector reform. You know, the issue, I think it's extremely important. We all know that the civilian public sector is oversized, and we have to deal with that issue, and that is actually delaying all the issues that all the policies that we should be looking at to resolve the unemployment problem, such as investment, long delays, procedures, arbitrary interpretation of legislation, and all of that. And I think, as has always been said, overemployment is a much bigger problem. And I subscribe to the point that His Excellency made, Marwan Jum'a made earlier, about Defense Law number 6. The projection that there will be better economic growth in 2022 might be wiped out by the fact that we will have more people on the streets. And actually, if we are thinking of the interests of the businesses are losing money, and they are losing opportunities because they have to take care of employees that sometimes they don't need. And this is a dilemma. I was wondering whether there was any work done on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Before I give the floor to our speakers, Sadia and our panelists, I would like to share with you as well one comment and one question on the chat. Shireen says that the issue of job preferences and mentality is not supported by research. The economy has been creating low-skill, low-wage, and poor working condition jobs that were filled by an unlimited influx of low-skill, low-wages, migrant workers. We are in a low-skill, low-wage, low-productivity equilibrium created by economic and labor policies and not mentalities. Also, there's a question how decentralization of public transportation would help, knowing that even in the capital, where resources are better, the public transportation is weak at best. Let me first give the floor to Sadia, and maybe our panelists can jump in tackling some of the questions that were forwarded to them. Please, Sadia.
Thank you, Excellency Nasreen. I think this has been a tremendous, interesting and valuable discussion for us to hear from all of you on that. And let me go first to Shiri's comment that's and a question that is on the chat. And I think she is echoing a lot of issues that are behind the numbers that we are seeing. And this is one of the concern, and one of the change that the economy has to have is looking at the fact that the productivity challenge, right? This is what she's talking about. The quality of job also matters. It's not just having a job, and how that job is actually also interacting with growth. One thing that we are seeing, and if you look at the empirical analysis, right, and we do see the employment elasticity of growth has been declining over time. And the same thing that we are seeing if we do a total factor productivity analysis to look at where the growth is coming from. We also see the labor productivity going down. So the issues that she's highlighting are concern, and they're concern for a lot of countries other than Jordan as well, in terms of how to create quality job which are also productive. I think that's a key question. And here, if we look at how the sectoral growth is coming from, right, and this is also reflecting part of the issues. We have seen services sector expanding over the past 10 years, where the more employment is going into the services sector out from the agriculture and industrial sector. But we're also seeing that the jobs in the services sector are not a high quality job either. So when you look at the labor productivity within the services sector over time, even though the employment scale is increasing, they are basically low productive jobs, right? And so the contribution going to the growth is also accordingly getting adjusted. But this is also a complex question as well, right? And this pretty much, I mean, all of them are kind of indicative, and if I can take all of them together, right? Starting from Excellency Marwan, who raised a very, very important point, and I think Excellency Faris, particularly Excellency Marwan, talked about the policy horizon, I think, and that's a fundamental issue that Jordan policymaking, and of course, keeping in mind that we are in a very exceptional circumstances because the 2020 due to a COVID-19 shock across the globe, and 2021 still is turning out to be an exceptional year, right? But like he talked about before that. So the policy horizon, once we get out of this crisis, need to also change toward a medium-term approach, right? And this is, I think he has rightly pointed out that the medium-term approach will have priorities which are likely to be different from the priorities which the policymakers have to face when they are firefighting. And the medium term and the longer terms, things like let's say institutional building, the improving the governance in the country, accountability and voice, all of those are super important thing, and also the things that we talked about in terms of the human capital challenges itself. So there's a significant amount of reform agenda that the government of Jordan also owns and is working toward moving this status quo toward a positive direction. But I do agree, changing this lens from a very small time period to a longer term 10 to 20 vision in terms of where the Jordan needs to do, and then having a consistent policy around that is also is a significant point. With the Excellency Faris, I can also reach out to independently. You can, Nasreen, connect me, and some of the literature that he's referring to as related to the World Bank is available, and I'm also happy to share that there's quite a bit of a significant work that is available in certain areas. And of course, the area that he talks about is a very big area, and it's also very complex with a lot of dimension. So we are working on some of the reforms in those areas, but we have partners, and the government of Jordan has partners across the spectrum, where different partners are working on different areas to provide support. So we are not the only one in this support. So I will stop here, and just one request. I see my lead economist, Christos Kostopoulos, has also raised hand. If you can also give him some opportunity to say something. Thank you so much.
Yeah, let's hear what Christos would like to say at this point, since we are hearing from the World Bank side, let's say. Please, Christos, and then we'll move to our speakers.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. I just want to compliment that Sadia has covered a lot of things. Look, I think that, the one issue that I'll just say 2 or 3 things. I mean, first of all, in a small open economy, we always need to look outwards and we need to be competitive, right? And we need to look at how competitive we are. Now with COVID, we're at a tough time. This outward orientation is being challenged a bit. Our tourism, or Jordan's tourism, is hopefully recovering, but might still be under stress for a year or so, depending on the global conditions. And then the pandemic has also brought a lot of rethinking, right, that the region is doing. So for sure, in the medium term, the long term, we need to continue exploiting the outward orientation. But in the time being, I think we can also look at internal inefficiencies to look for productivity gains, because that's also how we get growth. So, and this, for me, this comes to 2 issues. I mean, one issue that we have in Jordan, and to be frank, we don't always put our finger on it very well for the data, is the contestability of the economy, right? So it's not only how competitive is it vis-a-vis the outside world to look at real wages, but how much competition within it is there, and how well can the competition help to bring more efficiencies, and to create this higher value added and the better job. So I think these 2 issues of external competitiveness, looking at wages, looking at infrastructure quality, is very important. And also the internal competition is important. The other point I think about the medium-term thinking, I think Jordan has had a lot of medium-term plans. I think these are usually not wrong, but the anchoring, right? This thing of keeping this, what the colleagues mentioned, this issue of having a bit of a better balance between the short term and the long term in the policies, that is a bit of a challenge. So I think that, it's very hard to address overemployment or employment someone mentioned, or employment in the public sector, and to try to reduce it when there are no places in the private sector to go. So Jordan's growth has been about between 2 and 2.5% for a very long time. So I think that's where one needs to look at. So what does it take to get that growth rate up, to get the quality of investment up, but also to do it with more contestability in the economy. I think that will start bringing the higher value-added jobs in, but those factors, I think, are still under control. The real wages, electricity prices, those needs work, but it doesn't mean that just because they need work, we don't address what we can. And again, the internal contestability is hard to work on, right? It's hard to work on because industries and companies are already used to that environment. But that is within the control of policymakers. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christos. So while we are still in this comment regarding policies, regulations, there was also a comment from Samah Quran. Would revising taxes, customs, regulations to attract more private, local, and external investors be a catalyst in declining the deficit and creating more jobs? And to which extent this is feasible at this stage? At this point, allow me, we have like 6 minutes only, so maybe I will give a maximum of 2 minutes for each of our panelists to comment. if they would like to, Dr. Adel, Engineer Jamil, and Dr. Ghazi.
Thank you, Nasreen. And I just want to mention about the employment, because we have mentioned it a lot, and Dr. Ghazi fairly discussed it. I think if we look to our growth today, about 50% of the growth rate achieved during the second quarter came from sectors that have a limited ability to create job opportunities. Most notably, the sectors of finance and insurance services, real estate, and agriculture. In addition, the producers of government services. An important aspect of job opportunities created during the second quarter of 2021 were occurred by foreign workers. Confirming this, the employment rate among non-Jordanian decreased by 3.7% points during the second quarter of 2021, compared to the first quarter of the same year, and by 1.3% points from the same quarter of 2021 to reach only 13.1. So I think we have structural labor market reforms that we need to work on. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Adel. Before going to Engineer Jamil Mjahed, I don't know if you saw the chat from Maria Jose. She said, regarding decentralization in public transport matters, the current situation has led to some unclarity in terms of roles and responsibilities and limited coordination among different institutions. Decentralization could help better define these roles and better manage resources. It could allow the Ministry of Transport to concentrate its efforts in developing the necessary policies to advance on a green and financially sustainable public transport system for the country, and LTRC to supervise and coordinate with the local regional authorities. These local regional transport authorities could carry out all transport planning based on up-to-date information and manage contracts with operators. Also, there was a suggestion regarding the competition issue from Shireen. She mentioned, can the next economic monitor explore competition and public capture and policy capture to build forward better? So I'll leave it for you, Engineer Jamil.
Thank you. I will answer two questions. Actually, the first comment was from His Excellency Marwan Juma regarding the policies and long-term strategies. As we mentioned, and I think the report mentioned, that is, we don't lack actually long-term transport strategies in Jordan. The first long-term transport strategy was adopted in 2014. And another transport policy documents adopted by the cabinet in 2018. And Ministry of Transport, they have a 3 years plan from time to time to implement the long-term transport strategy. So the strategies are there, but the problem always comes with the implementation with these plans. And most of the time, the main problem with the implementation is a lack of funding. That is what I meant. That is, when it comes to allocate the money for these projects to develop the public transport, always there is no fund for these money. And this is what I meant when I said there is no political will to develop the sector. When there is a political will, there won't be a lack of funding for the development of public transport. The second question regarding decentralization, I mentioned that as one of the amendment to the law in 2017 and hasn't been implemented. There is different opinion about decentralization, but the main objective behind that amendment in the law was the public transport operation should or regulation should be part of the city planning. What I mean that is public transport planning should be part of the city planning. That is why we said that is the municipalities have to have authority. And I'm not talking about the policies, because the policies of public transport is with the Ministry of Transport. There is a regulatory body, which is, of course, LTRC. And for the public transport, it is important, I mean, to give these municipalities the responsibilities to, of course, planning and operating the public transport within their area, because I think, as I said, they have to go along with the city, the public transport planning to go with the city planning. As you mentioned, there is an experience with, of course, the GAM to organize the public transport within their Greater Amman area. I believe some of the municipalities, maybe they are not ready or capable, but I think we have to work in that. And in the future, the municipalities, I think they have to provide these services to their citizens.
Thank you, Engineer Jamil, and the urban planner tend to agree with you. But here, I always, Dr. Ghazi, leave the hard part to you. So you have less than 1 minute.
Yeah, it's okay. I'll take 1 minute.
Answer, please.
It's okay. Thank you very much, actually. Just 1 or 2 minutes. I'll answer quickly what is mentioned by Dr. Shireen and Dr. Samah. 2 questions about suggested economic policies. First, I would just to pay attention that this is an unusual crisis. Coronavirus, or what I used personally to call it coronomics, which is studying the impact of corona and the policy to deal with coronavirus. They are still actually using the same classical economic tools to deal with unusual crises, and they use the tools that we used for usual crises. That's why we see sometimes the structural problems. In order actually to facilitate and like to have, I totally agree with what Shireen mentioned about a low skilled labor, what the economy creating. This is again because we don't let the private sector to expand more and more. We still have obstacles for and limitations for financing the tiny and the small enterprises, not the medium, because most of these enterprises are owned by youth. And we see in the report that youth unemployment is almost 50%. So again, we need, if we can facilitate finance for such age category in the tiny enterprises, this will create a high valued job actually. One last point is about actually, this is what we all notice in Jordan. We have actually a reduction in the efficiency of infrastructure due to the lack of maintenance by the government as a result of the budgetary constraints. So we don't see any maintenance for the infrastructure. This is affecting again the productivity of labor for both public and the private sector. And this is explaining why we don't have a high skilled labor and creating high skilled jobs. I have more, but time is limited. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ghazi.
Can I make one intervention, please? Because I think it's a future topic, just for a future topic. I know it's time to go. I think that, you know, I come from Greece, from Southern Europe. We also want the government to do a heck of a lot. You know, we want them to. But I think on this issue of transport and stuff, I think that, you know, Jordan has a level of public spending where it can spend. Now it has a certain amount of debt. It needs to work on reducing that debt. So there's a lot of sectors that want the government to do more. And on the investment side, I think the recurring costs on infrastructure, they're very important. but maybe it's a time to think of finding a role for the government to do things differently. Just so that, because that also has, looks for efficiencies, but maybe private sector does more, maybe learning how to budget these things that the private sector can do, maybe trying to find competition in the provision of some of these services, even more than we have, structure the competition better. Because I think if we put it at the doorstep of the government, we will get stuck on budget constraints. So I think I like Shireen's idea to think for the next GEM or 2 GEMs down the road. We will also be starting a country economic memorandum in Jordan. This is a strategic report, which we hope we don't fail by doing it in our offices and presenting to you. So I hope we do it collaboratively. But really this issue of trying to displace the spending to solve the problem from the government to bring in private sector, and maybe we could work on that together a bit more.
Yeah. Our pleasure.
Thank you so much. So as discussed, I noticed some chats still popping, but perhaps our colleagues can respond to the chats directly as we are running late. So as discussed earlier in the session, COVID-19 revealed vulnerabilities and opportunities. However, with good insights, reviews, and rethinking, public and private institutions should reinvent themselves to maximize the benefits that emerge from COVID-19. The coronavirus is a rare and unexpected event, and we embarked on that event while we were facing many challenges before that pandemic. It should have a significant, hopefully, and positive consequences. At this point, I would like to thank you all for being so interactive and prompt during the past 95 minutes, hoping that the discussion was able to bring forward useful insights on the report. Big thank to our panelists and participants and speakers, and the World Bank Group, of course, for the good partnership with the Jordan Strategy Forum. And until our next event, be always well and safe, and we hope we will see you in person. Have a great day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. See you all. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.